Hey, everybody. It is 7 o'clock in the East. It is 4 o'clock in the West. It is Tuesday, August 15th, and this is the strategy session. Excuse me. Get my tongue out of the way. I am your host for this evening, Reed Galen. Joining me, Stuart Stevens, legendary ad man and author of It Was All I. Stu, welcome.
Thank you, brother. Good to be here.
And as always, a legendary Democratic strategist and host of That Trippy Show, Joe, welcome back.
Great to be with you guys.
And there's a fourth box that will be here soon with the one and only Rick Wilson. And when he gets here, he's a man who needs no introduction. So, guys, all right. So here we are, less than 24 hours away from Trump's fourth indictment of the year. And I'd like, as Sam, who makes all this magic happen for us, said there's been 1 billion words written on this. My own very modest contribution included. So, Stuart, what's one thing that stuck out to you in 98 pages? Hi, Rick. 98 pages of indictment from Fani Willis.
I really think this is a RICO case against the Republican Party, and that everybody who is in the Republican Party is an elected official who went along with this, who didn't call it out, who didn't do the really incredibly difficult thing of having your comm shop congratulate the president-elect of the United States, is an unindicted co-conspirator. Because this goes from, it's the whole breadth of the Republican Party. And they're the ones who are responsible. It's not about Trump. It's about how they reacted to Trump. And I think that Trump, I don't see how Trump's not guilty of this. If you read the transcript, it seems to be the most slam dunk case imaginable. I don't understand why Rick's former attorney and good friend Clea Mitchell, as I like to think of her, has not been indicted, but hope springs eternal, and that may still happen.
Oh, I suspect that has to do with Clea singing like an opera star.
Yes, I would not be surprised.
Well, Rick, so welcome. We're not going to introduce you because you were late, and those that are late do not get introduced. But Rick, tell us what stood out to you in the Georgia indictment last night.
Really, what stood out to me, the indictment itself was very, carefully crafted. What stood out to me was Fani Willis going out on stage and giving a tight, disciplined, focused exegesis of what's really going on. Mm-hmm. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't scenery chewing. It wasn't the fate of democracy. This was a prosecutor stating very clearly the case she has, the case she's prepared to make, and the degree and scope of this conspiracy that Donald Trump was the head of. So she impressed me more. Look, I'd never seen her on television doing the work, and this will be something that is fought both in the courtroom and on television. And so I felt very heartened that she was so steady.
Mm-hmm. And Joe, how about you?
I think, look, I've sort of countered to what a lot of people think, that this one's going to be the one that moves the slowest and takes the longest, and there's no way they'll get 19 folks in the same courtroom and all that good stuff, defendants, I mean. But I actually think this is going to move everything faster than it would have, because it is the one opportunity for a lot of flipping at the bottom very fast, flipping to bigger and bigger fish. And I think that could happen within weeks. I mean, you could see somebody who's been an indicted co-conspirator to suddenly be, not an indicted co-conspirator anymore. They're a cooperator, which then flips and flips. I think this thing could break things a lot quicker, even in some of the other cases, because of who might talk now.
Well, and I'll tell you the things that stood out to me. The first one is reading about Miss Ruby and the fact that these guys went to her house multiple times. And it's this weird collection of people, a pastor from Illinois, a publicist from Chicago, right?
Kanye's PR person.
Right. Just like the strangest collection of people. They're calling her repeatedly. They're banging on her door. She's got to call the cops. The cops are telling these people to leave her alone. We've seen the video from the January 6th hearing where she basically said she and her daughter Shay, right, their lives have been upended. Ruby's mother, right, who liked to walk her neighborhood, 90-something years old, can't do that anymore.
Right.
But the other part, too, that I think is getting overlooked is that there were people as part of this conspiracy who actually broke into voting machines, Dominion voting machines, to access voters' personal data. And guys, that is maybe I'm still naive for being surprised about this, Stuart, but this is a whole different level of crime, in that now you're trying to figure out, or at least determine, one, who voted for who, and two, maybe there's something we could do about it, which is, the same idea as like, hey, we know you didn't vote for the Fuhrer this time around. Let's go have a talk with you.
Yeah. As has been said a million times, it's always projection with these people. When you work in a campaign, they broke every rule that the first day you learn you don't do. You don't call elected officials and try to tell them to get votes. I mean, it is the clumsiness of this, and which I think that clumsiness comes from an arrogance that there would be no accountability, that there would be no one held accountable. How else do you sit in the Oval Office of the United States and call the Secretary of State of a not particularly tight race? Let's remember that. 11,000 votes. I kind of remember the United States of America electing a president based on 535 votes in a state that's a lot bigger.
I have some memories of that night, Stuart.
A lot bigger than Georgia. So, they say it's a close election. Well, think about what 11,000 people look standing in line. That's a long line, man. So any kind of recount like that would clearly show probably that he lost by more, which most recounts just reaffirm the conviction. Mm-hmm. And it's just this fundamental arrogance. And at the heart of this, which I think can't be said enough, is a deep racism. That all of the areas that they thought were suspect were areas where Philadelphia, Chicago, Atlanta, what do they have?
DeKalb County.
What do they have in common? They have a lot of African American votes. And this is just an extension of Jim Crow, where, instead of saying we can stop people from voting by guessing how many jelly beans are in the jar, we'll now go in after the fact and disenfranchise you. And I, for the life of me, think that, what Trump has no respect for women, but no respect for black women particularly. And I think just one of the great ironies here is that this horrible man, this criminal, this enemy of the United States is likely to be brought down and imprisoned by a system composed primarily of black people who are patriots, led by black women.
So Rick, let's talk about. Let's talk. Amen. Let's talk about that, because as has been noted in many places, this is a state set of charges, right? This is not a federal charge, which means that there is no federal pardon authority on behalf of a president or even a governor in the state of Georgia by just a happenstance. And so we talked about Cleta Mitchell. We talked about where's Lindsey Graham in this. Joe noted that some of these people who are currently unindicted co-conspirators might be indicted co-conspirators. Those who were already named, nobody, not any of these people, Rick, I think, want to spend one day, let alone one night, in Reidsville State Prison.
Hey, nobody wants to be in a Georgia State Prison. Nobody. Not for 1 minute. Nobody wants to be in the DeKalb or the Fulton County Jail for one night. And so, look, a lot of them are fronting very, very boldly right now. Jenna Ellis is out today saying, I'm right with the Lord. As I tweeted to her, I'm like, well, when you're in prison, I'll send you a live, laugh, love sign. Okay? These people right now, they're very bold right now. They're very cocky right now. But they will realize very quickly that the legal landscape of Georgia, where they committed many of the crimes in this conspiracy, when you read the indictment, this isn't some loose sort of he said, she said. They have Fannie Willis has a paper trail. They have a large net of evidence and discovery they've already gone through. They know what they're doing in this case. So you're going to see a lot of these people, the folks that didn't think they'd ever get in trouble for doing this, like Rudy, they're going to get hammered. They're going to get put in a wedge. And if they don't want to go to jail, I'm going to tell you, the train for squealing on Trump is going to have about a 5-minute schedule with Willis. They're going to either cooperate or they're going to be brought down in the same path. But again, I do want to say one more thing that it's important to remember. Folks, this case is going to take a while. It's not going to happen tomorrow. Trump's not going directly to jail next week. He still is the dominant player in the Republican primary. And as you're seeing now, the Republican Party has responded to this very sharp, clear, well-written, well-characterized indictment by saying it's the deep state, it's Hunter Biden's laptop, it's blah, blah, blah. They're going to play the game they always play. He's going to still be the nominee. He's still going to be the Republican candidate and maybe the Republican president if we're not careful. So we can't get ahead of this and say, oh, victory is ours.
Well, Joe, to Rick's point, the thing is about the strategy and the tactics that they employ, they do it over and over again because it tends to work, which is they just let's use the Hunter Biden stuff. They banged and banged and banged and banged and banged on it enough, right? Where eventually the mainstream media will pick it up. And this past weekend on the shows, there was Hunter Biden stuff all over the place. You've got, they're appointing special counsels and everything else. But what I want everybody to understand is why they do that is to build the equivalence. Joe Biden and Donald Trump are just as bad as one another. America's just as bad as Russia, right? We're all terrible. We're all broken. So what's the problem?
No, and that's what they're doing. But I still think I want to get back to what's different. Look, this isn't in the federal court system, right? I mean, all those guys thought. I'm convinced from day one we can break any laws we want because we're going to keep him in and he's going to pardon our ass, if need be. This one, that can't happen. It's in the state, and that's why again all the number of defendants and the different, unindicted co-conspirators who now have to face the fact that even if he can delay and delay and delay the federal cases, even if he does win, that the Georgia system is going to keep grinding on, and they got real time that they face. I think that means some of them are going to come, I think, quicker. I mean, even in the next few weeks, I think you could see people start to spill. But you're right, Reed. What they're going to end up doing, is what they've always done. It's the false equivalency. It's the no labels. They're both bad. Even no labels plays into this garbage, right? That Biden's just as bad as Trump. Are you kidding me? I don't know. There's 94. It's one thing. Yeah, it could be the deep state, or it could just be the guy's the biggest crook who's ever existed in the White House.
Right. So Stuart, to think about the state base, this is Georgia. We know that a couple of weeks ago, the Attorney General of Michigan charged the false electors up there with a crime. We could make an assumption that will happen again in Arizona. And there's nothing that says, because so much of this is laid out in the dozens, if not hundreds of individual acts that Willis lays out in the indictment, that these people, some of these very same people, couldn't be indicted all over the place by different state attorneys general.
I don't understand why Richard Grinnell isn't being looked at here. I mean, he was there with Matt Schlapp. And they were all over
Richard
Arizona.
Grinnell, Matt Schlapp.
And Nevada, they were out there challenging this.
Stuart, that could happen. One of the things I think this
could happen
going on is that prosecutors in Nevada and some of these other states may decide, hey, let's take a look and let's go. I can do this in the state and put these people on the burner. And I think that could have. That's why I think this case is so important, because of how good a job she did laying this out. and going after it. It could ignite now in a bunch of these other states.
That's exactly what happened with the tobacco case, where they went in and they set up a tort here, and these different attorney generals in the states joined in on it. What? Here's the thing: we know that these people knew that they were lying, right? So Mark Meadows, for example, I think he's going to flip because Mark Meadows doesn't have a lot of money, and
Well, he's also trying to move it to federal court. By the way,
I saw that. He's a weird guy. I don't think he's particularly well balanced. He has a tendency to sort of burst into tears a lot. This is a guy who is not really
just like that first scene in Shawshank, like we mentioned a couple of weeks ago. He's going to be that guy.
Stand-up guy you want between me and penitentiary Mark Meadows. Man, I don't know, man. I would try to cut a deal. So there's a whole world of these people that were part of this. That was one of the things about 1/6 when you look at it. It involved every element of the Republican Party: the White House, the Attorney General's Association, the RNC, Senate staffers, congressional staffers, senators, congressmen, and fundraisers. There's a party apparatus. It wasn't some rogue action.
Reed Stewart makes a really good point there, because there is an arc between Election Day, and I went back today and I was looking through Twitter on election night, election day, and the days after, and it really struck me how quickly Mitch McConnell went out and said, "Oh, it's totally appropriate for Trump to challenge these elections." How quickly Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, Tom Cotton, Rick Scott, Tommy Tuberville, Cindy Hyde-Smith, Mike Lee, all the rest of them started saying, "Oh, well, obviously we have to challenge this election." This was built. Trump got a signal from the establishment, gentry conservatives in the Republican Party, to proceed with this. They are unindicted here, but they were part of this arc between Election Day 2020 and January 6th, or actually after January 6th, to the date where McConnell killed the impeachment vote in the Senate, where these people are responsible. They had encouraged him. They told him, "Okay, go ahead." They didn't say, "Donald, this is insane." There was the famous quote in the Washington Post saying, "Oh, what's the harm in indulging him? Why not? What's the harm? He's just going to tweet about it and then go away." That is an anonymous quote, largely and frequently attributed to Josh Holmes. I can't confirm that, but this was a story that Trump just didn't come up with this idea just with his crazy clown car lawyers. The entire Republican establishment in D.C. was saying, "Challenge it, Donald. Go at it. See if you can steal this election. Do what you can. It's fine. We're okay. We're with you. We won't say no." And so those people, they're not on trial in this particular case, but they sure as hell should be.
Well, Joe, the one thing that Stuart said in the aftermath of those days and weeks that Rick is talking about, was that they wanted to see whether or not it would work. Right. And
Pence was one of them.
And some of them were willing to go further than others. We saw, you talk about McConnell, right? McConnell finally said Joe Biden's the president-elect after the electors voted. But at that point now, you'd had 6 weeks of steam built up, Joe, in all of the different stuff going on.
Well, not only that, I mean, I still say this conspiracy is still going. It's going on today. Part of this whole thing of making this about the deep state, and we're all trying to stop him, from being elected. It's gone right into round 2 of making it happen all over again. The indictments aren't stopping him; they're encouraging him. And by the way, I think people who've gone along with it this long are saying, "Well, hey, maybe my only way out is to get him back in there, so I don't get caught up in all this." I mean, it's literally feeding on itself, and it's ongoing. Which is why we can't take anything for granted that any of this will be decided or a verdict, that stops him. We've got to fight, at the ballot box, and knocking down the disinformation and other stuff out there on every front.
So if you think about it, The governor of Florida, who bragged about how well their elections are run, and rightly so. They run a good, did a
We
good job
do.
running elections in Florida. He made headlines across the country by saying who the president of the United States was. Think about that. I mean, that is the Republican Party is such a dysfunctional, corrupt organization that if somebody comes out and says what every fifth grader knew 4 or 5 days after the election, that Joe Biden was president-elect of the United States, that
Right.
person makes headlines. We're talking about, dumbing deviancy down. That is what's happened here. And we really should hold these people to the same standard. There are crazy people like Carrie Lake that are still out there talking about this stuff. But if you are an elected Republican official and you're not asserting that Joe Biden won a legal and fair election, you're an election denier.
So,
And
Rick,
most Republican governors are in that category.
and
Correct.
attorneys general and everybody else. So, Rick, take
correct.
us inside. Rick, take us inside Bedminster for a second. So we see all the bluster on the Truth
Right.
Social stuff, both on the federal side and now against Fani Willis, and previously against Alvin Bragg, because that's what he has to do, right? He
Right.
thinks if I just push and push and push, because it's worked his whole life, right? So we should understand that for him, this has been a winning strategy. But
Yep.
now we know that, again, Meadows is on the hot seat. Maybe Mitchell and Graham have already flipped. We know that Susie Wiles has so far not been indicted. We know she's talked to the grand jury. So how many people around Trump, are under legal scrutiny, under threat of indictment that he can trust at this point?
Look, very, very few. He is a tighter circle than he's ever had because he can't communicate to a lot of the people he would like to communicate with now. And he can't go out there and express his anger, hatred, whatever the word you want to choose would be, in ways that are not going to put him in more legal jeopardy. And I'm here for that. Look, this is like every other mob boss, Bedminster.
It is one thing, Rick, on the mob boss front. I just want to interrupt real quick. They have now started referring to these people as Trump's associates, just like they would with a mob boss.
I was just getting to that exact thing. When I worked for Giuliani, okay, and I worked for Rudy Fuchs for a very long time, okay, in the era where he was relatively speaking sane. One thing I was always fascinated by was Rudy's descriptions of just how they took apart the mob in New York. They took them apart by doing things like bugging the Ravenite Social Club in Manhattan and finding out who are all the capos, who are all the associates of the mobsters. And so they knew they could draw a diagram of who these people were, who related to who reported to who was in debt to whom. Right now, Jack Smith and Fani Willis have the same kind of RICO predicates against Trump, and they are rolling these people up.
Probably Dana Nessel in Michigan too.
Oh yeah. And most of these people cannot afford to go out and defend this on their own. Today we found out that Jenna Ellis, who had been a Trump supporter, who is in legal jeopardy up to here because of Trump, because she was supporting DeSantis, Trump's joint defense agreement, and his lawyers will not cover her. There are a lot of people that are going to end up in that position. And a lot of those people are going to say, the thought of spending a lot of time in a Georgia prison,
or even a little time, frankly,
and they're going to run like hell.
Right. Now, I mean, because I've been on Michael Cohen's podcast a couple of times.
Sure.
And I interviewed him when his new book came out. And even in the quote unquote country club prisons, this is not a good deal, Joe. This is not a good place to spend any time.
But Rick, what's your do you think any of these people will start flipping quickly, or do you think they'll just keep holding out and holding? I mean, what's your
if I was making a bet on this, I would say that some of the big fish like Rudy hold out as long as they can, because they're basically in a tacit negotiation with Trump to cover their legal expenses. The small fry are gonna flip fast, and I don't know how valuable they are. I'm not able to determine how much like a Mike, what's his name, Mike Rogers or Mike Power or whatever
Right.
You know what I'm
Mike
talking about.
Roman.
Mike Roman, excuse me. How much of Mike Roman has to deliver here for Willis. But in all these cases, these folks have now entered into a world where the expense of defending yourself in a major criminal trial like this is millions of dollars. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands or more. Donald Trump can raise that overnight. And I heard today he was raising buckets of money in the last 24 hours based on based on the grand jury indictments and on his truthing. So, look, folks, we're in a spot right now where I think there's going to be a very meaningful and very significant window where the danger to Trump rises from these people feeling like they've been hung out to dry,
which they have been.
100%.
Because, as you say, Rick, everything Trump touches dies, and everyone Trump touches dies too. But Joe, let's talk about that, because the one thing we know about these kinds of authoritarian movements, and I've said this before, is that the only people that they hate more than you and me are each other, right? Yeah. So soon as it starts to come out that some of these people are flipping, right, the MAGA machine, from our lips to God's ears, will start to eat itself, right, as they turn on each other for their own lack of loyalty.
Absolutely. It's going to happen in this, and it's also going to happen politically in races across the country. The same with, as Trump is a turn. If anybody turns on Trump, they're going to turn on them with fervor. And if somebody
100%.
somehow emerges and Trump crumbles, the MAGA folks are going to go over whoever it is that emerges out of the ashes. And on flames, by the way. I mean, it just, There's no way out for the party. It's just, and for any of these people, I think it's just, the question is, it's clear that they're not going to fragment. They're going to hang with Trump. And that means we have to keep the pro-democracy coalition completely unified to roll into November against this.
That's right.
Absolutely, that's my biggest fear is that we get diluted by other, by people talking about challenging Biden or other third parties or things. If we stay united, we can beat this thing, but we got to stay focused, united, and it's about democracy. It's about Trump versus democracy and nothing else. Because this party.
So, Stuart, just to play devil's advocate for a second. So we're into fourth. We're into a fourth indictment. We're going to be in a mass purity phase of MAGA for some period of time, maybe forever. And I think Joe's point about primary candidates and everything else next year is a good one. Is there somebody who could take him on, who could say, I've got, the guy that was supposed to be Ron DeSantis? Does that person exist in real life?
Well, what is just think about it. We've said in these rooms, what would the premise of their campaign be? How do you run a campaign in this moment and not run against what the party has become? I don't really see that you're offering an alternative if you say that, well, I'll still support Trump if he wins the nomination, but I'm going to be an alternative to Trump. It just kind of doesn't parse. So that leaves you maybe with Chris Christie, Asa Hutchinson maybe. But look, guys, they're going to get maybe 8%, 9%,
right now, Stuart, that's exactly right. And right now, if you look at the former Golden Boy Ron DeSantis, who is now in third place in Iowa and in fourth place in New Hampshire, okay, he's the guy with money. The rest of them don't have any cash. They can't compete. Trump could, as Reed used to say, Trump needs a cell phone in his airplane. He can campaign anytime, anywhere.
Right.
The rest of these guys have to build name ID. They have to buy name ID. They have to be out there in the public eye. And this is not the same spot that Ron DeSantis was in a year ago, where he was at 32%. Now he's at 9%. He's collapsing at it by the second. So you've got this campaign where Christie, Ramaswamy, Mike Pence, Ron DeSantis, Doug Burgum, all these other weirdos, add them up, and you get to 10, 12%, 13.
Well, I went on the record today and urged DeSantis to withdraw from the race. I just want you guys to.
Thank you, Joe.
I
Thanks,
really.
Joe.
Did he immediately call you and ask you to come to Tallahassee?
But the whole point here is, okay, so DeSantis, so Christie gets by him. He's in, second in New Hampshire now or whatever, and he somehow gets by Trump. Let's go down the fantasy lane
Right.
here. How the hell MAGA? Oh yeah, those MAGA folks, man, they're gonna just run out there for Chris Christie. It's like, this is nuts. It's not.
No, let me tell you
Also,
who
look,
they're
guys.
hot for. They're all waiting in the sidelines for Glenn Youngkin.
Yeah,
'Cause what
right.
MAGA really wants-
So,
Brian Kemp,
guys,
or
let's
Brian
also
Kemp,
don't
right? Like,
forget.
come on.
Right, Brian Kemp,
So you-
but they're waiting for the private equity bro in the sweater vest. That's exactly where they're really craving is that. Come on.
So guys, play this out. Say you beat Trump in a primary, you end up with
Sure.
more delegates. What happens the next day? Donald Trump wakes up and his
The
mission
primary was
in
stolen
life
from me by the deep
is
state.
to make sure that you're not president of the United States.
Yeah, exactly. That's
I mean, he would,
But you know what's funny? What's funny, Stuart, is that we've been saying that for however long, right? If even until last year, if he got in and this happened, he would make sure to kill the party on his way out the door.
Yeah.
Just, I think today, the National Review, which I guess is the thinking man's conservative outlet now, I don't know, finally got the message on that. Hey, if somebody beats him, do you know what he's going to do, Rick?
Yeah.
Do you know what he'll do?
Shocking.
Oh my God!
I say, we used
What
to
he
say,
should do.
we used to say in the party that character was destiny. Now, apparently, that was just a marketing slogan, like Coke is it. And Coke meant nothing, like Chevrolet's the heartbeat of America, like you're going to take your car to a cardiologist.
Right.
But it was true. I mean, that's the irony. And all these things we used to say. We used to say, don't negotiate with terrorists. That what is Trump but a terrorist? They say terrorist of democracy. We said that we accused Democrats of believing in situational ethics, which was never true, but we still said it. So what is situational ethics? It means that you're going to say one thing if it's in your advantage and another thing if it's not in your advantage based on what is supposedly your value structure. And that's just all melted. And I remember I was, I did all of Chris Christie's races, right? I was there when talked to him about running for governor, when he was U.S. attorney. I loved the guy. And when he endorsed Trump, I really sat there and tears came to my eyes. I mean, I felt like it was watching a friend drink himself to death. And it's good that he's now saying this. I mean, that's better than if he was still defending Trump. But I mean, give me a break. This guy worked in Trump's debate prep, and Trump almost killed him with COVID.
Right.
And he still was for Trump. So, I mean, man,
Look,
it's such a tragedy because if Christie had remained who he was, he could maybe be in standing now to have some sort of moral position to say I was right. But they just all collapsed. I go back. I'll never ask myself, how did 1930s Germany happen again?
Right. All right,
it won't
guys.
be the same outcome, but it's the same process.
All right, so guys, we've got about 10 minutes left. So let's go around. Rick, what's the indictment related or not? What one thing you're looking at that you think everybody out there in TV land needs to hear about?
So I'm really keeping an eye right now on two big things. I'm watching whether Trump can keep his discipline, because while he's right at the edge, he's still not quite going over the line on the things he's saying. I've talked to a couple lawyers. They're like, this is a strategy that is not smart, but it might be brilliant. He's trying to pollute the jury pool in all these cases. And I'm really watching for that as a centerpiece of their strategy, because, guys, it only takes one MAGA asshole on these juries to blow the whole thing up. And they're smart enough now to lie to pollsters, and they will lie in the jury selection process, and that worries the hell out of me.
All right, Joe, how about you?
I'm looking at when the hell the press and pundits out there stop doing if the economy's so good, How come Biden's approval ratings are so low? And why is he being rated so low on the economy? When every single one of them who's been through any of this knows that there's like a 3 to 6 month delay between after things come out of the downturn and start to move up in the economy before anybody feels it and actually starts raising approval ratings. And it's already, I think, starting to happen. I mean, Emerson, I think, had a poll out today with Biden's favorable starting to come up and his ratings on the economy coming up. I just think that I think, again, we're in this place right now where it is Biden's numbers are going to turn and are turning, but it's going to be 6 months before it really shows up. And at the same time, that contrast, again, because Trump is going to be out there day in and day out, suffocating, taking all the oxygen out of the air with everybody else. What astonishes me is how the press coverage is always looking for the negative on the Biden economy when when they know it takes, like when Reagan when Reagan took office after Carter in the downturn, it took 2.5 years of that presidency before the numbers started to turn. And I'll admit it, as Democrats, you're hoping, like, please don't turn that fast, because like if he fails with the economy, we have a shot. Well, it didn't happen. It did turn fast enough. That's what I think is happening right now. See if the press catches up.
But even then, in I believe it was probably his second term, right, Joe? Reagan had to raise taxes, right?
Yep.
Like, he eventually raised taxes and granted an amnesty, but we'll get to that. All right, Stuart, how about you?
I'm looking at the Biden campaign because I have a lot of respect for the Biden campaign. I think that they ran a historically good campaign. In the system since 1976, both candidates had accepted federal funding, which leveled the playing field. Both candidates had the same amount of money. That was true when Carter lost. That was true when Bush lost. So Obama blew up that system. So the first time you had a challenger and incumbent not in the federal funding system since the McGovern-Nixon race was when Romney ran against Obama. So then you have Biden. Biden runs against Trump. Trump's an incumbent president. They're both not in the federal funding system. Biden wins. When is the last time that happened? I can tell you. It was when Herbert Hoover lost. And he had a bad year. So the Biden campaign did something pretty good. And if you watch them out there now, they're starting to advertise. You see Kamala Harris is out there in doing ads that are putting out there on YouTube.
The president's been out all week.
Yeah, I think that they're going to start raising a lot of money. Their budget is $2 billion.
They are. They've been hitting their marks on the finances.
They have a lot of discipline. I mean, I've been in a place where, you've been a front runner and you go out and you really screw up like they did when they ran, for the primary. And yet they still stayed with their same message and their same candidate. They didn't try to reinvent themselves. That is incredible. And damned if they didn't win. Won it all. Yeah. That is incredibly impressive to me. So I think that they have a lot of discipline. They have a lot of patience. I would imagine that Biden is not going to be ahead by any margin until maybe after the Democratic convention. But I don't think they'll panic. I think they'll stick with their plan. And it's our job to support them.
Yep.
And I do not understand this Democratic tendency not to be behind your guy.
It kills me. Joe
Biden, but Joe Biden.
We got Democratic congressmen calling for a primary. I mean, it's just.
It's. I don't understand this.
I'm not even going to say the guy's name because I know he wants clicks.
Because you see, sometimes if that was something that a Republican was thinking about and came out and said it, he would be the member of Congress from the state of Antarctica, and no one would ever hear from him again.
Correct. Yeah. He would disappear immediately. Instead, he got a hand job from Chuck Todd this weekend on live TV. I'm like, why? Why? The guy's not even – he doesn't have a campaign. He doesn't have money. He doesn't have a structure. It's just trolling.
Right.
Oh, and did you guys see, by the way, all the Fox News money that Manchin's getting?
Yes.
Funny about that.
like, what's funny about that is I was thinking, man, they must really not like the governor of West Virginia. I mean, they must be giving him all that money so he could go run for re-election against the Republican governor of West Virginia. That's why they're giving him that money.
Well, and just as to that end, Joe, there's no way, because the no labels people don't release their finances. There's no way for us to know that Rupert Murdoch hasn't given them $100 million, right? How are we ever going to know? We can't prove the negative.
I mean, he's certainly giving them plenty of earned media, going on TV saying they go on Fox and they get the soft kid glove treatment. And look, I think Rupert Murdoch may have given them $100 million. It's a theory that I believe has legs, Reed.
Who's to say?
They can disprove it at the end of this.
Yeah,
at the end of this show.
All right, release their donor list.
So, guys, I heard a stat today, and Joe, you'd probably be closer to knowing if this is right or not. I heard a stat today that there are 32 million more Generation Z voters going into 2024 than there were going into 2020, and that there are 20 million fewer baby boomers and senior voters than there were 3 years ago. That's a 52 million voters winning.
Those
Reed,
are life insurance statistics.
Better place, Reed. Okay, they're in a better place. That's
right.
but it's demographics. It's like that's what happened. And that's why I've said this before, and I really believe it. That because of Trumpism and MAGA, the Republican Party is losing this generation forever. I mean, just forever. Again, I don't want to go back, keep bringing up Reagan, but that's what happened to a lot of young people when Reagan came on, and started to win over a lot of those boomers back then. Yep. That stayed with the Republican Party, and now they're entering their twilight years, and they wouldn't even vote for Reagan today. But my point is that it's a generational shift, and there's no way that doesn't have an impact in places like Georgia, Wisconsin. We've seen a lot of just data on how particularly college towns now are really and they're participating. They're actually unlike.
Right.
Yeah, they're showing up, and they've done that in Ohio and Kansas, everywhere. They are engaged in voting.
Yep.
No, and God bless them for it. They saved our bacon last year. And Stuart has actually been saying that. Stuart, what's your line about those born who are under 18, Americans under 18?
Yeah, I mean, right now, those who are 15 years and younger, the majority are non-white. So America's already become a minority-majority country. It's just a question of it becoming time. And these people are still going to be minority non-white when they turn 18. And that's why the Republican Party is so panicked here. They can't change this. So they have to change the rules of voting. It's an unutterable truth. No one ever changed the rules of a game you were winning. No one who ever had Tom Brady at his peak said, this whole passing thing, we have to limit this. It just doesn't, it's just,
only rugby rules. Right. We have to
fair.
just do backwards passes from now on. Right.
So that's what they're doing. And that's a lot of what the Georgia thing was about. And there is a huge effort out there to change the legal structure of voting and to make it more difficult to vote. And they think they're going to win.
Right. And you see that out there.
Ramaswamy character who wants to make voting 25 and have a test and all this other stuff. They get it. They know why they know what's coming.
Right. Well, and we're going to help make sure it does come next year. Yep. All right, gang. Before we go, want to make sure that you tune in to the Enemies List podcast with Rick Wilson, That Trippy Show with Joe Trippy. Do not miss Zero Line with Sarah Ashton Cerrillo. She is
fantastic podcast.
Fantastic podcast. Incredible stuff that she's been doing over there. Literally the Lord's work on behalf of the Ukrainian people. I hope also you'll take some time to check out the Lincoln Project podcast. Joe, Rick, Stu, as always, thank you for joining me. We'll see you guys next week. Big debate next week, so we'll do a debate preview show. How many people can bend over and kiss their own asses on the stage at one time? That will be the question we'll answer. Everybody, thanks again. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, folks.
See you guys.
Everybody.